The moment Catherine stepped into the royal gala wearing that one tiara, the atmosphere shifted. Eyes narrowed. Murmurs swirled. Because this wasn't just about diamonds, it was about dominance, legacy, and a ghostly message aimed straight at the heart of the monarchy. That night, her tiara said everything the palace refused to, and someone wasn't supposed to see it. The gala had been meticulously choreographed. Every step, every smile, every shimmer of silk under the chandeliers. These royal events weren't just social affairs. They were rituals. Rituals where every jewel carried a message. Every gesture was a page in an unwritten book of power. And this particular night had been billed as one of unity and tradition, with Catherine expected to wear something elegant, familiar, and safe. But when she arrived, heads turned for an entirely different reason. It wasn't the gown. It wasn't the poise. It was what shimmered at her crown. A tiara. One that hadn't been seen in public for over 4 decades. One that hadn't even been acknowledged in royal archives for years. And yet, here it was, gleaming under the lights and sending a quiet, calculated shock through the upper echelons of Britain's most impenetrable institution. From the instant she entered, the energy in the room fractured. A flash of confusion from certain courtiers. A tightening of the jaw from those who knew its origin. The press hesitated, cameras clicking, unsure if they should ask what they were all thinking. Because this was no ordinary jewel. It was a symbol. A forgotten chapter that someone, perhaps even the late Queen herself, had chosen to erase. Until now. What Catherine had done was not merely bold. It was unsanctioned. This tiara wasn't on the list. It hadn't been cleared. In royal circles, that matters. Every jewel worn in public carries silent approval from above. Or at least, it used to. But Catherine had long since stopped asking for permission. Her position had evolved, her power grown, and this was the night she made that known. Not through words, but through crown. She had resurrected something buried, something once thought forbidden. And in doing so, she sent a message no one could ignore. Inside the palace, the effect was instantaneous. Conversations shifted. Whispers erupted. Old advisors began placing calls. Private secretaries exchanged looks. And the Queen herself? Her gaze was cold, measured, almost unreadable. Because if Catherine was wearing that tiara, it meant someone had defied the unspoken rules. Or worse, that a decision had been made, and no one had been told. The monarchy thrives on silence, on control. Catherine had just broken both. Outside, the public began to speculate. The press, starved of royal drama, sensed a deeper story. Why this piece? Why now? And why her? But within the walls of the monarchy, there were no statements, only silence. And in the royal family, silence always means something is burning just beneath the surface, something no one dares say aloud. But to truly understand what made this choice so dangerous, we have to rewind. To a jewel silenced, and a queen who once refused to wear it. Long before Catherine, another royal touched this tiara, and immediately set it aside. Queen Elizabeth II wore it only once, then it disappeared. No explanation, no photo releases, just a quiet extraction from circulation. And when something disappears in Windsor, it never vanishes without a reason. The history of the tiara is both faint and fractured, whispered more than recorded, shadowed more than shown. Its origins trace back to a moment of transition, when the crown was still reeling from abdication and war, when the royal image had to be tightly choreographed, pristine. It was said to be crafted for a young queen in waiting, a jewel of uncommon structure and unsettling presence. When Elizabeth was handed the piece in the early years of her reign, she did wear it once, but only once. No official portraits followed, no public events. And then it vanished. Quietly, but absolutely. There was no damage, no known theft, no documented reason, just absence. Inside royal circles, that kind of silence is the loudest signal of all. Speculation mounted. Was the design too unusual? Did it evoke an era the Queen wanted to forget? Or was it tied to someone else entirely? Someone the palace had already begun to erase. There were murmurs about emotional weight, that the tiara carried not just diamonds, but memories. Some said it had once been promised to another royal woman, one who fell out of favor, one whose name was never uttered again in the halls of Sandringham or Balmoral. If that woman had worn the tiara, or tried to, it may have become a symbol of resistance, or worse, rebellion. There's one version of the story, never officially confirmed but passed along in the shadows, that suggests the tiara was briefly gifted. Not loaned, gifted, and then, quietly, taken back. The reasons vary depending on who tells the story. A breach of protocol, a political affair, or simply that the piece said too much, too loudly, for someone whose voice was already being muted. What is certain is that after its retrieval, the tiara never surfaced again in any public display, catalogue, or royal accounting. Even experienced royal archivists hesitate when asked about it. They deflect. They redirect. They change the subject. It is said that among the Queen's private vaults, separate from the official royal collection, there exists a select group of pieces categorized not by era or gem, but by risk. Jewels deemed problematic are stored there, too politically charged, too emotionally volatile, or simply too dangerous to be seen. And this tiara was quietly assigned to that category. It had become a relic not just of history, but of threat. A visual weapon that could awaken old wounds if ever seen again. Elizabeth, ever cautious, reportedly feared its implications. Not the aesthetics, but the symbolism. The crown survives on controlled narratives, and this piece told one the monarchy wasn't ready to face. And yet, decades later, in a glittering hall filled with global cameras and rigid hierarchy, that very tiara resurfaced. Not on a forgotten royal, not by mistake, but worn deliberately by the woman destined to become queen. So why, after all these years, would Catherine choose the one tiara the monarchy quietly erased? Behind the smiles and curtsies, Catherine has been waging a battle. Not for power in public, but for recognition, position, and permanence behind palace walls. And lately, not everyone in the firm has been on her side. This tiara wasn't just a jewel, it was her signal. Because in the hierarchy of the royal family, power isn't always about titles. It's about perception, presence. Who commands the room? Who commands the narrative? And for years, Catherine played by the rules. Graceful, dutiful, supportive. But the deeper she moved into the heart of the monarchy, the more she realized that loyalty didn't guarantee influence. Her visibility was never in question, but her authority, her place in the power structure, remained quietly contested. Especially now, as a new queen, Camilla, had settled into a position that once seemed unimaginable. And with that, a subtle but undeniable tension began to spread. Because with Camilla's ascendancy came an uncomfortable truth. The monarchy was shifting. Not just publicly, but internally. For Catherine, that meant navigating a more crowded arena, one where decisions were being made in rooms she wasn't always invited into. Royal insiders whispered of moments where her input was overlooked, or her role minimized in favor of more established figures. A curtsy may have remained, but the hierarchy had grown complicated. Some said the firm wanted Catherine to wait her turn. Others hinted they feared how far she might go once she took it. And yet, despite it all, Catherine's influence was growing. Not from within palace walls, but outside them. Her work with early childhood initiatives, mental health, and modern motherhood had earned her global acclaim. Every public appearance brought surging support. The press adored her. The people respected her. Quietly, she was becoming the face of a modern monarchy. But behind the scenes, those very successes began to raise eyebrows. Power built outside the firm is power they can't control. And the monarchy doesn't take kindly to unpredictable variables. This gala was meant to be routine, a celebration of unity, tradition, and transition. But Catherine knew it was more than that. It was one of the rare occasions when protocol couldn't silence her, when she could speak in the only language the monarchy truly listens to: symbolism. And so she did. She chose the tiara they had buried, the one no one was supposed to touch, not because it was the most beautiful or the most grand, but because it carried the weight of a message no one could misinterpret. She wasn't waiting her turn anymore. And she didn't ask for permission. That's what shook the foundations. In the royal world, that's the first unspoken rule. You ask, or you don't move. But this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, controlled, and deeply emotional. Catherine was no longer playing the part of the princess. She was asserting her role as the future queen. Not quietly, not hypothetically, but boldly, visibly, irrevocably. Because beneath all the formality and function, the royal family is a game of power, played in whispers. But that night, Catherine broke the silence. And in doing so, she drew a line. One that didn't just rattle the monarchy, it unsettled its reigning queen. But even more telling is what the tiara represented, not just to Catherine, but to someone who couldn't confront her directly: Queen Camilla. Everyone expected Queen Camilla to wear it first. It fit her lineage, her seniority, her narrative. Yet it appeared, brazenly, on Catherine. The message wasn't subtle. This jewel belonged to the future, not the past. And Camilla's expression that night? Ice. In the world of monarchy, appearances are never accidental. And when it comes to royal women, the choice of a tiara is as much a political act as it is a fashion decision. Camilla knew this well. Over the years, she had quietly assembled her own crown wardrobe, pieces that reinforced her legitimacy, softened her past, and elevated her presence. Slowly, through subtle yet consistent symbolism, she shaped her image into that of a regal matriarch. Unthreatening, steady, established. And this particular tiara, once hidden away, was supposed to be the next jewel in that strategy. Whispered to be reintroduced, perhaps even worn at a future state occasion. It had been discussed, marked, tentatively assigned, until it wasn't. Because Catherine wore it first. Not quietly, not discreetly, but on a night when the world was watching. And in that moment, the Queen's carefully curated legacy trembled. It wasn't just a breach of etiquette, it was a breach of expectation. Catherine had skipped the line, and the implications weren't lost on anyone. The crown doesn't operate on spontaneity. Everything is scheduled, agreed upon, signaled. Except this. The tiara's reappearance wasn't simply a surprise. It was a threat. Camilla had spent years repositioning herself as the embodiment of continuity, navigating the monarchy's fragile transition after the Queen's death. For many, her role was controversial, but jewelry had become her quiet ally, blending heritage with symbolism, rewriting the story through diamonds and pearls. Now, Catherine had taken a piece long believed to be Camilla's future claim and wielded it like a challenge. The old narrative had been overwritten in one night. Sources behind palace walls say the mood shifted instantly. There was tension. One courtier reportedly admitted, "It wasn't spoken, but it was felt." What followed was a series of private conversations, away from cameras, away from reporters, conversations where words were exchanged, though no one would confirm by whom. Some say Camilla confronted senior aides. Others believe she simply went silent, her anger masked beneath royal composure. But one thing became clear. Something inside the monarchy had cracked. From that night onward, the warmth between the Queen and the Princess of Wales seemed to cool. Not overtly, not publicly. But those close enough to watch noted the shift. Fewer shared engagements, colder greetings, awkward spacing in photos. It wasn't open hostility, it was something far more dangerous. Distance. Because the monarchy can survive scandal. It can survive media storms, abdications, even betrayals. What it struggles with is internal division, especially when that division occurs between two women standing at the top of the institution. One representing tradition, the other the future. And now, they were no longer aligned. The tiara had done more than sparkle. It had provoked. And though no one would dare address it directly, the palace felt it. The weight, the silence, the warning. But if Camilla was rattled, there was someone else entirely devastated. Because this tiara was once promised to her mother. In the 1980s, it was whispered that this tiara was meant for Diana. Never confirmed, always denied. It matched her elegance, her fire, her tragedy. Yet she never wore it. Some say it was pulled last minute. Others say it was cursed. Now Catherine brought it back, and Diana's shadow followed her in. There are jewels in the royal collection that carry weight. But this one carried a wound. From the moment Diana entered the royal family, she became a symbol too bright for the institution to control. The public adored her. The firm struggled to contain her. And amidst the pageantry and photo ops, there was always tension behind the scenes. What she was allowed to wear, what she was told to avoid, and what it meant when she defied those quiet boundaries. The tiara in question was part of her initial selection, according to long-standing royal insiders. Its reemergence now isn't just controversial, it reopens a carefully stitched wound. According to reports at the time, Diana had been scheduled to wear this tiara for a significant early engagement. It had been prepped, positioned, paired with a custom gown. But just days before the appearance, something changed. The photo shoot was cancelled. The press received no explanation. The jewel was quietly removed from the schedule and never seen again. That disappearance sparked rumors, ranging from the supernatural to the political. Some claimed the tiara had too much emotional baggage. Others suggested Charles himself objected, that the shape didn't suit the image he wanted his wife to project, or that it had been worn once before by a woman the palace preferred forgotten. As Diana's marriage began to unravel, the symbolism of what she didn't wear became just as important as what she did. The tiara's absence became an echo, a silent reminder of the choices made for her and the ones she was never allowed to make. And, as her relationship with the monarchy fractured, so too did the possibility of ever reclaiming that jewel. It vanished from consideration, and with it, a future that might have been hers. For William, the memory of his mother's pain is more than personal. It's generational. And for Catherine, that legacy is not only sacred, but strategic. By choosing that specific tiara, she wasn't simply resurrecting a royal artifact. She was reclaiming something Diana never could. In that moment, Catherine stood as both the wife of a future king and the daughter-in-law of a silenced icon. The message was unmistakable. She hadn't borrowed from the Queen's past. She had borrowed from Diana's ghost. And for the public, it landed like a thunderclap. The press erupted with praise, with questions, with speculation. The narrative shifted instantly. This wasn't just fashion. It was loyalty. It was defiance. It was justice. Some called it poetic. Others saw it as a challenge to everything the current monarchy was trying to stabilize. But as public sentiment exploded in admiration, something else stirred within the inner sanctum of Windsor. Fear. Not every royal jewel lives in the light. Some are hidden, locked deep within Windsor or underground at Kensington. They're not part of official inventories. And this tiara? It came from one of those forbidden vaults. The question is, how did Catherine get access? The royal vault system is far more complex than the public realizes. While tourists and journalists admire the glittering exhibitions and officially documented collections, there exists another layer entirely, one cloaked in discretion, protected by generational silence. There are the jewels the world is meant to see: state diadems, coronation sets, heirlooms displayed with careful curation. And then there are the others, the pieces not spoken of, the ones quietly locked away, without ceremony or record. Tiaras, necklaces, brooches, objects that carry not just history, but unresolved emotion, private scandal, or lingering controversy. And these pieces, insiders say, are sealed in what is unofficially known as the second vault. Unlike the primary collections managed by royal curators, the second vault isn't overseen by historians or advisors. It exists under the purview of the reigning monarch and a single trusted aide, typically the sovereign's private secretary. No public inventory, no press access, just a list known only to those who guard it. It's where jewels go to disappear, either to protect the monarchy or to contain the damage they once caused. This tiara was long believed to be among them, buried not because of its aesthetic, but because of what it represented: a failed promise, a lost future, a memory that made those in power uncomfortable. So how did Catherine reach it? One theory suggests she had help, not from a stylist, not from a jeweler, but from someone who had once seen the tiara worn, or nearly worn. Someone who remembered its controversy, its weight, and its absence. Perhaps an elderly royal aide still loyal to Diana's memory. Perhaps someone in the shadows of the firm, quietly rooting for Catherine's rise. It wouldn't take many, just one person with the key. One person willing to bend a rule or ignore one entirely. And when they did, the jewel was extracted, polished, reassembled into a plan. Another possibility is more dramatic: that Catherine didn't wait for help, that she used her influence, quiet but growing, and requested it herself. Not through official channels, but through the whisper network that still thrives in the older corridors of Kensington and Windsor. A sideways conversation, a confidential nod, a favor owed. After all, her position as the Princess of Wales has its privileges. But requesting access to a vault never meant for her. That would be a breach, not of law, but of trust. And in a monarchy built on unwritten rules, that kind of breach is louder than any scandal. Still, there's a darker whisper: that no request was made, that Catherine simply acted, that someone opened the door without consent, and the piece was passed along under the cover of ceremony, Because preparing a tiara for a major public event isn't simple. It takes planning, coordination, hairdressers, security, archival checks. For this to happen without a leak, without a warning, means silence was enforced. Not accidental, deliberate, and powerful. The decision wasn't just bold, it was surgical. Catherine didn't stumble upon a forgotten jewel. She claimed it, with precision, with intention, and with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer asks for permission, which leads to the uncomfortable truth. Someone, somewhere, allowed this to happen. Someone with enough clout to override the silence of the vault. And the deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just about jewels. This was about succession. Officially, there's no question. William will be king. Catherine will be queen. But within the monarchy, nothing is official until it's acted out, visually, symbolically, politically. And that night, with one tiara, Catherine made her claim. Loud, clear, unchallengeable. In the royal family, power is rarely spoken aloud. It's performed, and that performance is steeped in history, choreography, and meaning so layered it's almost imperceptible, until someone breaks the pattern. Catherine did. The tiara she chose was more than vintage. It was a provocation, a reclamation, a signal that she was no longer the quiet presence standing beside a future king. She was the monarchy's visual future, already stepping into a role she had long been prepared to fill. Not with words, not with declarations, but with the unshakable symbolism of crown and lineage. For decades, royal women have used jewelry to say what protocol would never allow. The Queen Mother mastered it. Her jewels became shields, banners, warnings. She understood the power of association, how certain pieces could summon memory, loyalty, even fear. Catherine has been quietly studying that legacy, and now she's channeling it. That tiara was not part of her usual rotation. It was not soft, not delicate. It was stern, authoritative, almost ghostly in its return. And its reappearance from deep within the vault signaled something undeniable. The preparation for reign had already begun. To the public, it may have looked like a bold fashion choice. To those inside the royal system, it was far more calculated. The reactivation of that tiara, long considered retired, untouchable, was like raising a long-buried banner. It spoke to continuity, to memory, but also to power long denied and now reclaimed. And for certain members of the family, that message landed like a blade. Because it wasn't just what Catherine wore, it was what it displaced, who it outshone, who it silenced. Behind the scenes, the impact was immediate. Whispers among staff, aides trading glances, even senior royals caught in the quiet shock of being politically outmaneuvered in plain sight. This wasn't an accident. It was choreography, a pre-crowning moment masked as elegance. And it left others wondering what else had been decided without their input. What other plans had already been set in motion? Because when the future Queen of England walks into a room wearing a tiara, long thought cursed, forgotten, or forbidden, it does something no press release ever could. It rewrites the rules. And yet beneath the surface of that display, the palace began to splinter. Lines were drawn. Loyalties tested. Questions emerged not about Catherine's rise, but about the monarchy's direction. Was this the end of an era, or the start of something far more radical? One act of symbolism had triggered a quiet reckoning, one that would unfold in whispers, in pauses, in strategic absences. But just as the monarchy begins to fracture over Catherine's move, an even older voice enters the story, one who tried and failed to wear that tiara before her. She wasn't supposed to be remembered. A duchess married into the firm, adored by crowds, but banished quietly after one wrong move. She tried to wear the same tiara once. The photos were destroyed. Her fate? Never discussed. Until now. The monarchy's silence is never neutral. It's weaponized. And for this woman, once hailed as the future of a modern royal image, that silence was deafening. Her rise had been swift, her popularity unnerving. She wasn't born into aristocracy, yet she commanded attention with ease. Crowds loved her. The press adored her. But inside the palace, something was off. She wasn't molding herself to the firm. She was bending the firm to her presence. And then, one night, she chose a tiara, the very one that Catherine would wear decades later. And with that choice, everything changed. It was supposed to be a quiet engagement, an evening appearance alongside her husband, a public duty, routine. But when she stepped into the reception wearing the tiara, the reaction from the palace was instant and absolute. She hadn't cleared the choice. She hadn't followed the unspoken codes. The piece she selected wasn't just out of rotation. It had been quietly shelved for reasons buried in family memory. It was a piece associated with control, rebellion, and fracture. By choosing it, even unknowingly, she crossed an invisible line. The next morning, photographs that had been scheduled for release were pulled. Statements from aides, pre-written, prepared, were erased. Her public engagements for the following weeks vanished from the royal calendar. And then she did too. Slowly, methodically, her presence was reduced. Stories emerged, none scandalous, just vague enough to question her relevance. And eventually, she faded from view, swallowed by the machine that once welcomed her with open arms. She never gave interviews, never protested, and the firm never spoke of her again. But the resemblance to Catherine's trajectory is too sharp to ignore. A woman celebrated by the public, dismissed subtly by the inner circle, and then the same tiara, the same message, the same defiance. Except this time, it wasn't crushed. It was broadcast. In recent years, a retired royal aide, long thought irrelevant, came forward with a private archive. Among the sealed envelopes and memos was something unexpected. A letter, handwritten, unsigned. But the language, the tone, the phrasing, all unmistakably hers, the forgotten duchess. In it, she speaks of the tiara, of its weight, of the fury it unleashed, and of a hope that one day someone else would wear it, not in rebellion, but in triumph. The letter ends with a sentence that still haunts those who've read it. This crown was not meant to punish, it was meant to protect. If she wears it again, may it be with power, not pain. The document was never released. It remains locked in a drawer, protected by one of the few remaining staffers who remembers her face, her voice, her fall. But among certain circles, its existence is no longer a secret. Which forces the question, did Catherine know? And if that letter is true, then Catherine wasn't defying the monarchy. She was fulfilling a forgotten woman's final wish. Catherine never said a word. She didn't need to. The tiara spoke for her. It reminded the monarchy that silence is not submission, and that the future is not always chosen by bloodlines, but by boldness. That night, she didn't wear a tiara. She wore a warning. Inside the walls of Windsor, behind the soft faces and rigid courtesies, her choice sent aftershocks that no protocol could contain. A jewel that had vanished. A legacy that had been denied. And yet, in one motionless moment, it was all returned to the spotlight, without announcement, without permission, and without apology. For some, it was an act of quiet defiance. For others, a declaration of destiny. But for everyone watching, Inside the palace or out, it was unmistakable. Something fundamental had shifted. The public sensed it immediately. Online forums erupted. Commentators speculated. Headlines didn't ask what she wore, but why. They dug through archives. They uncovered whispers. They began to piece together a story that had never officially been told, but had always existed just beneath the surface. The narrative was no longer about a tiara. It was about inheritance, about unspoken alliances, about a woman who understood the weight of history and chose to carry it anyway. Within the monarchy, reactions were more muted, more dangerous. Some saw it as a betrayal of hierarchy. Others, a brilliant maneuver to assert presence without confrontation. There were those who warned of consequences, that such a move would be remembered, that silent acts have loud repercussions. But there were also murmurs, quiet affirmations from unexpected places, whispers from those who had waited for this moment for decades. Not everyone behind those palace doors was against her. Not anymore. And then, as quickly as the tiara returned, it disappeared again. Not officially retired. Not publicly archived. Just gone. Returned to the depths of the vault, its name still absent from public record. Some believe it will never be worn again, that Catherine made her statement. And now the jewel will be sealed away once more, its power discharged, its meaning preserved. Others aren't so sure, because if she wore it once, she can wear it again. And if she does, it won't be a whisper. It'll be a coronation in spirit long before one in law. But perhaps the most unsettling question is this. What did her gesture set in motion? Already, insiders suggest factions are forming, that trust has fractured, that the monarchy, so carefully kept afloat by images of unity, has cracked in places no one expected. And if Catherine's choice was indeed a warning, who was it meant for? And who will answer? And so the crown endures, but never without a cost, especially when the diamonds speak louder than the royals ever could.